Hello, everyone. I am very happy to be part of this second edition of the Early Career Marathon. I am Ai Ito, and I'm currently based in China. Today, I would like to talk about the relationship between romance of leadership and self-efficacy. Specifically, I would like to present you some results about a cultural study of leader self-disclosure as a charismatic leadership tactic on Chinese students. What is leader self-disclosure of a traumatic experience? Before I tell you more what it is, I would like to invite you to watch this short extract of an organizational leader who started a speech he gave at a graduation ceremony by opening up about a personal story. So this man used to be the CEO of Danone, the French dairy company. And the speech is in French, but please follow the subtitles if needed.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Je vais faire de mon mieux et je vais commencer en français et puis terminer en anglais, in English. Et si vous attendez un discours de référence intellectuelle, vous allez être déçus. Qu'est-ce qui m'a le plus marqué pendant ces années que j'ai passées comme vous ici sur le campus? J'ai décidé de vous parler de quelqu'un qui est né 20 ans avant, 1965, à Grenoble. Un petit garçon qui a eu une vie très pleine, une adolescence plus compliquée, turbulente, qui a fait une fugue, qui est parti, qui a trouvé un petit boulot comme ouvrier dans les travaux publics dans les Alpes, travaillant l'hiver au bord des routes, qui un jour a décidé de reprendre les études, a passé son bac. Et puis là, premier accident, il a été interné en hôpital psychiatrique. Il en est sorti. Il aimait la terre, il aimait l'agriculture, il aimait les paysans. Il a décidé de devenir ingénieur agronome. Il l'est devenu, il a commencé à travailler. Deuxième accident, il a été interné en hôpital psychiatrique et il n'a plus jamais retravaillé comme vous allez probablement travailler comme j'ai travaillé moi. Et puis un jour, il a décidé de rentrer au pays. Il est retourné dans son village, dans les Hautes-Alpes, retrouver ses amis agriculteurs, et le matin, il faisait du fromage à la laiterie. L'après-midi, il avait besoin de dormir à cause de sa maladie, et il allait près d'un torrent. Et en redescendant de ce torrent, il avait un vieux téléphone portable, pas comme le mien. Il le mettait près de la fontaine, et il m'appelait, et il me laissait un message téléphonique, tous les jours, avec juste le chant de la fontaine. Moi, j'étais avec le gouvernement chinois, de l'autre côté de la planète, dans mon bureau à Shanghai, à Paris, à Barcelone, au Mexique, avec vous peut-être. Et j'avais toujours cette petite voix, une fois par jour, qui me rappelait d'où je venais. Une nuit, quelques heures après que je l'ai laissé pour aller grimper en montagne, il est mort, emporté par sa maladie, il y a 5 ans. C'était mon frère. Qu'est-ce qui m'a le plus marqué pendant ces 3 ans ici? C'est ce coup de fil que je n'aurais jamais voulu recevoir, à 21h, au bâtiment C, 4e étage. Faber, c'est pour toi. Et où j'ai appris que mon frère venait d'être interné pour la première fois en hôpital psychiatrique.
Maybe you recognize this woman as well. She used to be until recently the COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. And in 2016, she also started a speech she gave at a graduation ceremony at the University of Berkeley of California by opening up about a personal story in which she tells the story of the sudden loss of her husband. This was just to show you that leader self-disclosure of a traumatic experience is a verbal tool that could be used both by men and women. So now, let me try to explain you more what is leader self-disclosure of a traumatic experience. It is a phenomenon that is often situated at the beginning of a speech. It is a voluntary act that the leader has decided to share on purpose, and thus it requires some emotional control. We do not expect the leaders to burst out into tears, otherwise the leaders might lose credibility in front of their audience. Leaders might open up in order to share lessons learned from a past experience, and there are benefits for both sides, meaning for both leaders and followers. First, it shortens the psychological distance perceived by followers towards the leader, and followers might feel closer and more comparable to the leader. Second, it might help the leaders to go through the mourning process of the hard experience. Through this presentation, I would like to try to answer to these two research questions. First, what are the processes by which leader self-disclosure bolster follower perceptions of charisma? Second, what are the possible process effects of leader self-disclosure on follower perceptions of charisma towards a leader? To answer these questions, I use the self-concept-based framework of charismatic leadership. This theory explains that charismatic leadership is a system. It is a process through which followers identify socially with the group or personally with the leader, and therefore this will lead to follower perceptions of charisma towards the leader. I will explain about the hypothesis a little later. Before, let me try to give you some basic understanding about the concept we're going to use in this presentation. First, what is charisma? It is a certain quality of an individual personality by virtue of which he or she is set apart from ordinary men, women, and treated as endowed with supernatural powers, superhuman, or at least specifically exceptional powers or qualities. It is also, more recently, it has been defined as a symbolic leader influence rooted in emotional and ideological foundations. So these authors, who are Antonakis and colleagues, basically found out that charisma could be broken down into a set of verbal and nonverbal behaviors, and that if we as human beings learn what are these behaviors and we learn how to use them, we could be perceived to a certain extent as charismatic. Romance of leadership is the degree to which followers over-attribute responsibility for performance to leaders. When good thing happens, we tend to give a lot of credibility to leaders. We tend to give a lot of credit to leaders. And on the other hand, when the economic situation or the situation of a company is not very favorable, we also tend to believe that it is the fault of the leader. According to the research in charismatic leadership, romance of leadership is negatively related to follower self-efficacy, but it is also positively related to charisma. This research, meaning this presentation, explores whether similar results will be found or not when Chinese participants are exposed to leader self-disclosure. The purpose of this research is to fill some gaps I found in the charismatic leadership literature. First, I noticed that there was a lack of clarity about the kind of relatable experiences shared by charismatic leaders. Also, I noticed that there is no established relationships between concepts such as romance of leadership, charisma, and self-efficacy, although they are all concepts that we often meet in this literature. Lastly, the research has not extended over a non-Western context. Therefore, we are going to test these variables in a Chinese context. What is important to know about the Chinese context is that China is considered to have a higher level of collectivism compared to Western countries. This means that a leader talking about personal matters in the workplace is not usual, and maybe it could be also perceived as not welcome. However, it is interesting to notice that according to ancient Chinese literature, the leader is actually encouraged to speak up authentically about their to speak up about the lessons they have learned through their experiences, because this message could be perceived positively by followers if it is meant to help them. For example, more than 2,500 years ago, Lao Tzu stated that individuals in a higher power status should communicate, but only and only in the aim to help others. There are also other political books, such as The Essential of Governance, which mention similar ideas. And these writings all encourage leaders to speak up in front of their followers if this is meant to help them. Therefore, based on such old writings, Chinese followers might have a tendency to glorify leaders and still to boost positively follower self-efficacy. To answer the research questions I have introduced earlier, I would like to present you the hypothesis that I have tested. So the relationship between romance of leadership and follower self-efficacy may be more mediated by charisma with the group of followers exposed to a speech of a leader who self-discloses, in comparison with those exposed to a speech with no disclosure in a Chinese context. To test such hypothesis, I used the vignette experimental methods with more than 300 participants, Chinese participants. They were all coming from a Chinese business school, and they were all enrolled in English-speaking courses. They were distributed or to the experimental condition or the control one. So basically what happened is that participants were randomly distributed to one of these two conditions, and they were asked to read a speech in which a leader self-discloses or does not self-disclose. We actually used the speech of Sheryl Sandberg, and we erased all signs of gender or her name, and we made the text anonymous, and we used her original speeches. After participants read one of the two vignettes, they were asked to measure attributed charisma, romance of leadership, and follower self-efficacy. Results showed that there was a statistically significant difference between the two conditions, and the hypothesis is therefore confirmed. What does it mean? It means that the Chinese participants who read the vignettes with leader self-disclosure, perceive that charisma mediates the relationship between romance of leadership and self-efficacy, which was not the case for participants exposed to a speech with no self-disclosure. This is an interesting result because when I collected data on Western students, I could not observe this mediation effect for both conditions. So this means that Chinese participants or the Chinese participants tend to maybe have a higher level of romance of leadership, and therefore they have a higher tendency to perceive the leader as charismatic when the leader opens up about a personal story in public, and therefore this might boost in turn follower self-efficacy, and so the productivity of followers. To conclude from this presentation, we can learn that self-disclosure boosts effectively follower romance of leadership and self-efficacy. It is also interesting to notice that romance of leadership should be more systematically considered in the charismatic leadership process, as this was noted in several writings from a followership perspective. Lastly, future research should focus more on the effect of leader gender, follower sex, and cultural comparisons more into depth. Thank you very much for your attention.